This is the moment when Donald Trump's pathological vanity finally collided head-on with America's cultural soul, and the wreckage is devastating to witness. At exactly 3:47 p.m. on Sunday, February 1st, 2026, President Trump signed an executive order that will go down as one of the most destructive acts of cultural vandalism in American history. He is shuttering the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts for 2 full years, effective immediately, not for safety reasons, not for urgent repairs, not for national security. He is closing America's living memorial to arts and culture because, in the words of Democratic Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, who sits on the Kennedy Center board, Trump needs to save himself the embarrassment because he's not going to have people attending the Kennedy Center because of him. What Trump has done to this national treasure is cultural arson disguised as renovation, and the flames are now consuming what was once the crown jewel of American artistic achievement. The Kennedy Center closure is the inevitable endpoint of a vanity project that started going wrong the moment Trump forced his name onto the building. In December 2025, just weeks after taking office, Trump orchestrated a hostile takeover of the Kennedy Center board, installing loyalists and firing respected arts professionals who had dedicated their careers to maintaining the center's artistic integrity. His first demand was simple but telling: change the name from the John F. Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts to the Trump Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. The board, under immense political pressure and facing threats to federal funding, capitulated. Gold-plated Trump signs were installed over the original Kennedy nameplate within 48 hours. What happened next was predictable to anyone who understands how the arts world operates, but apparently came as a shock to Trump and his team. The artistic community rebelled immediately and comprehensively. Major orchestras began canceling their scheduled performances. The National Symphony Orchestra, which had called the Kennedy Center home since 1971, announced they would be relocating to other venues rather than perform under Trump's name. The Metropolitan Opera, scheduled for a 3-week residency in March, pulled out entirely. Broadway touring companies that had booked shows months in advance started exercising cancellation clauses in their contracts. Within 6 weeks, the Kennedy Center had lost 73% of its scheduled programming for 2026. But the artistic boycott was just the beginning of Trump's Kennedy Center nightmare. The financial foundation began cracking immediately as major donors fled en masse. The Kennedy Center relies on a delicate ecosystem of federal funding, corporate sponsorships, and individual philanthropy. Trump's rebranding shattered that ecosystem overnight. Boeing, which had been a title sponsor of the Kennedy Center honors for over a decade, announced they were withdrawing their $2.5 million annual commitment. The Coca-Cola Company, Ford Motor Company, and American Express quickly followed. By January 2026, corporate sponsorship revenue had collapsed by 68%, leaving a $47 million hole in the operating budget. Individual donor rebellion proved even more devastating. The Kennedy Center's board includes some of the most prominent names in American philanthropy, arts patrons who have given tens of millions over decades to support American culture. When Trump's name went up on the building, they started pulling their money out. David Geffen, who had pledged $15 million for renovations to the concert hall, formally rescinded his commitment in a public letter that called Trump's takeover an assault on the artistic independence that makes American culture possible. Barbara Streisand withdrew a $12 million pledge for educational programming. The Mellon Foundation, one of the Kennedy Center's largest supporters, suspended all current grants pending a review of the center's governance. The Kennedy Center honors, traditionally held every December, became ground zero for the cultural war Trump had started. For 46 years, the honors had been the premier celebration of lifetime achievement in American arts, attended by presidents, Supreme Court justices, and the most celebrated artists of each generation. The 2025 ceremony, the first under Trump's rebranded center, was a disaster. Half of the scheduled honorees declined to participate. Those who did attend used their acceptance speeches to deliver pointed criticisms of the name change. Television ratings collapsed to historic lows. Corporate sponsors pulled out mid-ceremony. By the time the credits rolled, it was clear that Trump had succeeded in destroying one of America's most prestigious cultural traditions. The breaking point came in January 2026 when Trump demanded that the Kennedy Center host what he called patriotic programming to celebrate real American values instead of elitist garbage. According to leaked board meeting minutes obtained by 3 separate sources, Trump personally called Kennedy Center President Deborah Rutter and demanded that the center book more country music concerts, fewer classical performances, and absolutely no programming that could be considered woke or anti-American. When Rudder explained that the Kennedy Center's mission was to present the highest quality art regardless of political content, Trump reportedly responded, "Then maybe you're not the right person for this job." Rudder resigned the following week, followed by the heads of programming, development, and education. The exodus of professional staff left the Kennedy Center essentially headless, just as the financial crisis reached critical mass. With programming canceled, donors fled, sponsors withdrawn, and leadership gone, the Kennedy Center was hemorrhaging money at an unprecedented rate. The monthly operating deficit reached $8.3 million in January 2026. Emergency board meetings were called, but with Trump loyalists now controlling the majority of seats, the solutions proposed were as destructive as the original problems. One Trump appointee suggested selling naming rights to individual performance halls to offset the budget shortfall, effectively turning America's cultural temple into a corporate advertising platform. Another proposed converting the Opera House into a wedding venue for high-paying private events. These proposals sent the remaining arts professionals into open rebellion. Joyce Beatty, who serves as an ex officio board member representing Congress, became the leader of the resistance to Trump's cultural vandalism. In a series of increasingly heated board meetings throughout January, Beatty fought to preserve the Kennedy Center's artistic mission against Trump's commercialization demands. According to meeting recordings leaked to the press, the confrontations became personal and ugly. In one particularly explosive exchange, a Trump appointee accused Beatty of hating America for opposing country music programming. Beatty responded by reading aloud from the Kennedy Center's founding charter, which explicitly commits the institution to presenting the finest in the performing arts from America and abroad. The final confrontation came on January 28th, when Trump himself appeared via video call at an emergency board meeting. According to multiple sources present, Trump was furious about media coverage of the Kennedy Center's problems and demanded immediate action to fix the negative publicity. When board members explained that the negative coverage was driven by the programming cancellations and donor withdrawals, Trump exploded. "I don't care about your fancy donors," Trump reportedly said. "I don't care about your snooty artists. This is supposed to be America's theater, not some elitist club that looks down on regular Americans." The meeting ended with Trump issuing an ultimatum. Either the board would find a way to make the Kennedy Center profitable and popular within 30 days, or he would take executive action to solve the problem permanently. 3 days later, Trump signed the closure order. The executive order, which White House sources describe as drafted in Trump's private study at Mar-a-Lago without consultation from the Office of Management and Budget or the Department of Education, declares that the Kennedy Center requires comprehensive renovation and restructuring to better serve the American people. The order mandates a complete shutdown of all public programming for 24 months, while the facility undergoes what Trump calls patriotic renovation. The renovation plans, such as they exist, read like a fever dream of Trumpian excess. The concert hall would be redesigned with gold-plated fixtures and a presidential box that would be permanently reserved for Trump family events. The Opera House would be converted into what the plans call a freedom theater dedicated to patriotic entertainment that celebrates American values. The Eisenhower Theater would become the Trump Victory Theater, featuring a permanent exhibit of Trump's political accomplishments. Most grotesquely, the Kennedy Center honors would be replaced with the Trump American Greatness Awards, celebrating real Americans who make America great. The financial justification for this cultural catastrophe is as thin as tissue paper. The closure order claims the renovation is necessary due to structural deficiencies and outdated facilities. But the Kennedy Center underwent a comprehensive $250 million renovation that was completed in 2019. Every major system in the building is state-of-the-art and fully functional. Engineering reports obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests show no structural problems that would require closure, let alone a 2-year shutdown. The real reason for the closure is exactly what Joyce Beatty identified. Trump cannot tolerate the humiliation of operating a cultural institution that artists and audiences are actively avoiding because of his association with it. Rather than acknowledge that his vanity rebranding was a catastrophic mistake, Trump has chosen to burn down the entire institution. The cultural and economic damage extends far beyond the Kennedy Center itself. Washington, D.C.'s arts ecosystem depends heavily on the Kennedy Center as an anchor institution that draws visitors, supports local artists, and creates a cultural atmosphere that attracts other arts organizations. The Kennedy Center closure will devastate the entire regional arts community. The Washington National Opera, which performs at Kennedy Center, will likely be forced to suspend operations entirely. The National Symphony Orchestra is scrambling to find alternative venues, but nothing in the Washington area can accommodate their full programming. Hundreds of artists, technicians, ushers, and administrative staff are facing unemployment. The broader economic impact on Washington's tourism industry will be severe. The Kennedy Center attracts over 2 million visitors annually, generating an estimated $300 million in economic activity through hotel stays, restaurant visits, and retail spending. That economic engine stops completely with the closure. Convention planners who book Washington partly because of its cultural amenities are already relocating events to other cities. International visitors who come to Washington expecting to experience American culture at its finest will find empty stages and dark theaters instead. The political ramifications are equally devastating for Trump and the Republican Party. Art supporters tend to be educated, affluent voters who live in suburban districts that have been increasingly competitive in recent elections. Trump's cultural vandalism is galvanizing these voters in ways that traditional political issues often fail to achieve. The image of Trump literally shutting down American culture is politically toxic, especially among college-educated suburban women who are crucial swing voters in congressional elections. Joyce Beatty has already announced that she is filing federal lawsuits to block the closure, arguing that Congress appropriated funds specifically for Kennedy Center operations and Trump lacks authority to suspend those programs. Legal experts believe Beatty has strong grounds for her challenge, particularly since the Kennedy Center Act of 1958 establishes the institution as a quasi-independent federal agency with specific congressional oversight responsibilities. The lawsuits will likely result in months of litigation that will keep the Kennedy Center closure in headlines right through the 2026 midterm elections. Democratic candidates across the country are already incorporating the Kennedy Center closure into their campaign messaging, framing it as evidence of Trump's authoritarian tendencies and cultural ignorance. Attack ads write themselves images of dark, empty Kennedy Center theaters while Trump golfs at Mar-a-Lago, contrasted with vibrant arts programming from the center's golden years. The narrative that Trump is literally shutting down American culture resonates viscerally with voters who may disagree on complex policy issues, but share basic pride in American artistic achievement. International reaction has been swift and brutal. European critics are calling Trump's Kennedy Center closure the death of American soft power and questioning whether the United States can still claim cultural leadership when its own president is actively destroying cultural institutions. The BBC ran a documentary titled The End of American Arts, featuring interviews with artists and cultural leaders describing Trump's actions as unprecedented cultural barbarism. French President Emmanuel Macron offered to provide temporary sanctuary for American arts organizations fleeing Trump's cultural purges, a gesture that would have been unthinkable just months ago. What makes this cultural destruction particularly tragic is that the Kennedy Center has been one of America's greatest diplomatic and cultural assets for over half a century. It has hosted world leaders, showcased American artistic excellence to international audiences, and served as a bridge between American culture and the global arts community. The Kennedy Center honors have celebrated everyone from Duke Ellington to Meryl Streep, creating shared moments of national pride that transcended political divisions. Trump's vanity has destroyed all of that in less than a year. The closure order specifically prohibits any programming during the renovation period, meaning that the 2026 Kennedy Center Honors Ceremony is canceled entirely. The National Symphony Orchestra's 2026-2027 season is wiped out. The Washington National Opera's spring season, which was to feature the American premiere of a new work by John Adams, will not happen. Dozens of other productions featuring hundreds of artists are simply erased from existence because Trump cannot handle the embarrassment of his failed rebranding. Behind the scenes, White House sources describe an administration in chaos over the Kennedy Center debacle. Senior advisors reportedly warned Trump that closing the Kennedy Center would be politically disastrous, but Trump overruled all objections. One former White House official who spoke on condition of anonymity said Trump became obsessed with the Kennedy Center after seeing negative coverage of programming cancellations and donor withdrawals. He took it personally, the official said. He couldn't accept that artists didn't want to perform under his name. So instead of fixing the problem, he decided to eliminate the Kennedy Center altogether. The executive order was reportedly written by Stephen Miller and signed by Trump without the normal interagency review process. Career officials at the Department of Education, which oversees Kennedy Center funding, learned about the closure from news reports. The 2-year timeline appears to be arbitrary, chosen simply because it extends beyond the 2028 presidential election, suggesting Trump hopes the controversy will be forgotten by then. The Kennedy Center closure represents something unprecedented in American political life, a sitting president actively destroying a major cultural institution out of personal spite and wounded vanity. Previous presidents have disagreed with arts funding or programming choices, but none have ever simply shuttered a major cultural venue because it embarrassed them personally. Trump has crossed a line that even his critics thought was uncrossable, moving from political authoritarianism into cultural totalitarianism. The long-term damage to American arts and culture will persist long after Trump leaves office. The Kennedy Center will eventually reopen, but the trust between artists and cultural institutions will be much harder to rebuild. Major artists and arts organizations now know that American cultural institutions can be weaponized by authoritarian politicians, making them more cautious about programming choices and more likely to self-censor to avoid political retaliation. The precedent Trump has set with the Kennedy Center closure threatens every arts organization that receives any form of government support. What happens next depends largely on the courts and Congress. Beatty's lawsuits may succeed in forcing the Kennedy Center to remain open, at least temporarily. Congressional Democrats are threatening to use upcoming appropriations battles to force restoration of Kennedy Center programming, but the deeper damage to America's cultural life and international reputation may be irreversible. Trump's Kennedy Center closure will be remembered as the moment when American cultural leadership died, killed by the petty vanity of a president who could not bear to see his name associated with failure, so he chose to destroy success instead.